I don't have the program in front of me. Some of you have. So I think our next speaker is it Keith? You're next, Keith. I wanted to do a little introduction. And to do that, I have to do a little bit of gymnastics. Okay, I'll maybe, anyway, just... there's so many good things said about you, even on the internet, that I looked at your LinkedIn to try and get a bio, a more up-to-date one, and to be honest, I don't think it does you justice, because Keith was an MP, he was a barrister, he's in the World Federal Organization, Federalists. I think he was the chair, was it? The chair, and he's had so many lives, so many responsibilities, and I'm really grateful that he's made the trip again across the little pond. I wouldn't call it water, it's just a puddle, and he's gracing us with his presence. We're very privileged to have him, and I'm interested to hear his take on the Good Friday Agreement at 25. As I said earlier, I think he's a bit of a foreign policy expert, but he's too humble, I think, to agree with me on that one. So, yeah, he's also the chair of our UK UPF Board of Trustees, and I had to basically, I won't say I had to fight with Robin Marsh to get him over here, because Keith likes coming over to Northern Ireland. He's a big fan of Northern Ireland, having spent some time here in his duties as a statesman and as a peacemaker and as a unifier. So can you please give a big round of applause to the Honourable Keith Best.
So first of all, can you hear me without the microphone? Yes. I hate these things. Not least because if you bang on too long, people switch them off. First of all, dear friend, I mean, it's always a pleasure to be with you, and a great delight to be back here in Northern Ireland. I'm going to give a very personal reflection. I mean, I think we've just seen a tour de force, if I may say so. I hope it is going to be your dissertation, Colin, because it really encompasses not only the history, but also the current dilemma, not least that, that building that we caught sight of a moment ago is not being used at the moment, and the fact that regional government here has broken down completely, and Colin identified all those issues very much. But mine is very much a personal reflection, not least because I had the privilege and sometimes doubted pleasure of being in Parliament with the likes of Ian Paisley, with John Hume, with David Trimble, with Seamus Mallon, and a whole raft of others. And I took a great interest in things. So I've actually been attentive to the situation in Northern Ireland for more than 40 years. At Oxford, in the late 1960s, I knew Robert Narak, killed in 1976. To be convicted on the word of a senior police officer, curtailment of the right to silence, and longer detention periods. The memorial stands on the site to this day. So what can we learn on this anniversary of the ending of the Troubles, which lasted for 30 years, dominated my political lifetime, and in which some 3,500 people were killed in the conflict, of whom 52% were civilians, 32% were members of the British security forces, and 16% were members of paramilitary groups. It is the tradition in Ireland to look back in history rather than forwards. So for many alive today, that period is still raw with grief and a sense of unresolved recrimination. On my last visit to the Peace Walk in Londonderry, I walked to Free Derry Corner, saw the memorials and the slogans as those times were still very much relevant. We heard from and met the son of Patrick Doherty, aged 31, who was shot from behind while attempting to crawl to safety in the forecourt of Rossfield Flats on Bloody Sunday, on the 30th of January of 1972, and whose name is the first listed on the memorial of the 13 who were killed that day. Somehow, it seemed like yesterday. Yet it took the next 38 years for the Saville report to be made public in 2010, which concluded that the killings were unjustified and unjustifiable. It found that all those shot were unarmed, that none were posing a serious threat, that no bombs were thrown, and that soldiers knowingly put forward false accounts to justify their firing. The soldiers denied shooting the named victims, but also denied shooting anyone by mistake. Only on the publication of the report did the British Prime Minister David Cameron formally apologise. The people of Ireland have had to get used to delayed justice, with much of it still unfulfilled. And having served in airborne forces myself, I am ashamed that such a blot should besmirch their name. It is right also that I should acknowledge here that the Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy and Reconciliation Act 2022-23, for which royal assent now is imminent, will leave many dissatisfied, ending, as it does, any further legal proceedings concerning Troubles-related conduct and providing conditional immunity from prosecution for those who cooperate with investigations conducted by the newly to be established Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information Recovery. Amnesty International has commented that, and I quote, "The UK government are letting people get away with murder and blocking victims in the UK from getting justice. The law known as the Troubles Act is deeply damaging and will cause untold distress to victims," unquote. I can only express the hope, however, that if this does indeed lead to many unsolved deaths and injuries being resolved and information brought forward which may comfort those still remaining ignorant of what happened to their loved ones, then something will have been achieved, albeit in the eyes of some at the expense of justice. When I was Chief Executive of the charity Freedom from Torture, which cares for torture survivors, one of our patrons was Eric Lomax, who wrote The Railway Man, which was turned into a film of that name. You may have seen it. His involvement with Freedom from Torture gave him a form of freedom, and in his own words, and I quote, "For the first time, I was able to unload the hate that had become my prison." I was privileged to know Eric, now sadly dead, whose torture as a prisoner of war at the hands of the Japanese, and in particular one Japanese interrogator, left him with an enduring hatred of the Japanese, to the extent that he would leave a restaurant if a Japanese person entered. By chance discovery of the identity of his torturer and their subsequent meeting, he saw the deep regret in that man, and they became good acquaintances and correspondents. He states in his book, and I quote, "After our meeting, I felt I'd come to some kind of peace and resolution. Forgiveness is possible when someone is ready to accept forgiveness. Sometime the hating has to stop." Now we should recall that the Belfast Good Friday Agreement encompassed not only the political parties in Northern Ireland, the multi-party agreement, but both the British and Irish governments, the British-Irish Agreement, and was endorsed by referenda in both Northern Ireland and the Republic. It gave birth to Northern Ireland's present devolved system of government, sadly now is not yet working, on the basis of power sharing. It included acceptance of the principle of consent, commitment to civil and political rights, cultural parity of esteem, police reform, paramilitary disarmament, and early release of parliamentary prisoners, followed by demilitarisation. The agreement also created a number of institutions between Northern Ireland and Ireland, called the North-South, and between Ireland and the United Kingdom, called East-West. It involved major constitutional changes, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution of Ireland, for example, to facilitate it. It was subject to the consent of the people of both jurisdictions to give effect to it, and it came into force, as we know, on the 2nd of December 1999. As part of the agreement, the British Parliament repealed the Government of Ireland Act of 1920, which had established Northern Ireland, partitioned Ireland, and asserted a territorial claim over all of Ireland. And for their part, the people of the Republic of Ireland amended Articles 2 and 3 of the Constitution of Ireland, which had asserted a territorial claim over Northern Ireland. These were fundamental changes and have fostered collaboration on various issues, including healthcare, infrastructure, and environmental protection. This cross-border partnership has been instrumental in addressing common challenges and fostering greater regional integration. Clearly, there remains some unfinished business, but the cessation of violence is tangible. We must now see if there can be true reconciliation. The establishment of the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, which works to ensure that human rights are upheld and respected for all citizens, has been crucial in fostering a culture of respect for individual liberties and equality. The end of violence and increased political stability has enabled Northern Ireland to experience economic growth. Businesses have flourished, tourism has boomed, and foreign investments have poured in. The peace dividend has created a more favourable environment for job creation and economic prosperity. The peace brought about by the Belfast Good Friday Agreement has allowed for greater educational and cultural exchange. Students from diverse backgrounds can now engage in cross-community programmes, fostering understanding and reconciliation among the youth. Additionally, cultural initiatives have flourished, highlighting the rich diversity of Northern Ireland's heritage. Northern Ireland's natural beauty and historic landmarks have become more accessible to tourists since the end of violence. Sites like the Giant's Causeway, the Titanic Belfast Museum here, and the historic city of Derry, Londonderry, have seen a significant increase in visitors, boosting the local economy and cultural awareness. I've been one of them. The peace process has encouraged greater community engagement and grassroots activism. Civil society organisations have played a vital role in building bridges between communities, promoting dialogue and addressing issues such as mental health, education and social integration. Now, an important lesson is that there would not have been any agreement at all had it not been for dialogue behind the scenes, a point made forcefully by Lord Alderdice, the former Speaker of the Northern Ireland Assembly. While publicly stating that there could be no discussion with terrorists, we now know that John Major's government was indeed talking to the IRA for months before it became public in November 1993. There are messages here for the situation in Afghanistan and elsewhere about the importance of dialogue, even with those in respect of whom such engagement seems repulsive. Now, I appreciate that in an audience and location where the shadow of the troubles still looms large over everyone, it is delicate to urge the closing of a terrible chapter that the Belfast Good Friday Agreement represents, but the alternative is too awful to contemplate. Despite the continuing sense of loss and lack of closure, which the new legislation may well help to remedy, albeit at the expense of the perception of unfulfilled justice, a line has to be drawn. Forgiveness cannot be imposed by the community or legislation. It has to be a personal choice. Yet experience shows from so many examples in history, especially from Holocaust survivors, that continuing hatred is a cancer that destroys those who harbour it and does not affect the perpetrator. As Eric Lomax wrote, for the first time, I was able to unload the hate that had become my prison. The impact of an act of forgiveness, however, can be dramatic on the perpetrator. In October 1984, I was at the Conservative Party conference when my parliamentary colleague Anthony Berry and 4 others were killed by the IRA in the Brighton Hotel bomb, which was planted by Patrick McGee. Anthony Berry's daughter, Jo, is now a peace activist and public speaker. Following her father's death, rather than nurturing what would have been an understandable loathing of his killers, she committed her life to peaceful resolution and mediation of conflict. In 1999, after release from prison under the terms of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement of Patrick McGee, who had incidentally been given 8 life sentences and a minimum of 35 years, but served only 14, she met him publicly in November 2000 in an effort at achieving reconciliation as envisioned in the wake of the Good Friday Agreement, and went on to meet him several times. These meetings over 10 months formed the basis of a BBC documentary first broadcast on the 13th of December 2001. Subsequently, she spoke at St Ethelburga's Centre for Reconciliation and Peace in the City of London, which had been destroyed by the IRA in 1993, and she has appeared with Patrick McGee on many platforms. Her reconciliation work was featured in the film Beyond Right and Wrong. Patrick McGee, for his part, was described by the judge at his trial as a man of exceptional cruelty and inhumanity, and he continues to defend his role in the bomb blast, but he has expressed remorse for the loss of innocent lives. In his book in 2021, called Where Grieving Begins, Building Bridges After the Brighton Bomb, a memoir, he chronicles the profound experience of meeting Jo and the extraordinary work they have done together. A survivor of the bomb, Harvey Thomas, whom I remember well as one of Margaret Thatcher's close advisors and spin doctors and who died last year, forgave Patrick McGee in 1998 and had since then developed a friendship with him, including hosting him in his own home, citing his Christian faith as the reason why he felt compelled to forgive. And the Investment Monitor on the 10th of May 2021 ran an article called What is the Real Value of the Good Friday Agreement? And it reiterated a number of the issues that I referred to about tourism, about businesses and such like. And to show you how far it's come, it also mentioned how Reginald Maudling, Conservative Home Secretary in the early 1970s, famously said at the end of his visit to the province, "For God's sake, bring me a large Scotch. What a bloody awful country." Today's Northern Ireland has seen huge progress in both its society and economy, with vast improvements among its tourist sector, which I've mentioned, education levels and quality of life. Now, it's difficult to attribute all this to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement because economists are very loath to try to take into account factors that they can't prove. But it is true to say, I believe, that without that agreement, those things would not have happened to the same extent, if at all. You have to understand, I mean, it quotes that article, Dr. Eamon O'Kane, a reader in conflict studies at the University of Wolverhampton and author of a number of books on Northern Ireland. And he says, I quote, "The peace process emerged slowly and in many respects surprisingly. There were 2 tracks running at the same time. You have got the so-called constitutional talks between the main constitutional parties in Northern Ireland, i.e. the ones that don't advocate or support the use of violence, sometimes called the bookmaking talks. Then, unbeknownst at the time, there was also another process underway, often referred to as the back channel process. This is where, at one remove, the British government was speaking to people close to the IRA and Sinn Féin. These 2 strands came together around 1993, and the big thing about the peace process, certainly in the early days, leading up from the early to mid-1990s, up until the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, is the underpinning pragmatism of the process. It was about trying to persuade those who were using violence to stop. Now, it would be wrong to talk about all these things without acknowledging some of the problems as well. But we do have to acknowledge that hotel bedrooms now has almost doubled from those times to now, that more tourists are coming here, that more students are coming from overseas, coming to Northern Ireland universities, whereas during the Troubles, every young person here who was due to go to university wanted to escape the Troubles and come to the UK or go to some other countries as well. And all these are facts that can be looked at and seen. And Dr. Eamon O'Kane summarises as follows. If you want to be very macro about it, the social and economic impacts are visible for anybody to see. You have only got to walk around Belfast and the Titanic Quarter in the new investment area. I am often struck by this whenever I go back over there, that it feels far more prosperous, far more developed, and obviously far more peaceful. So let me conclude. It would be wrong, offensive, and frankly inaccurate to pretend that good can always come from tragedy. But it is also right that we should acknowledge how sometimes such dark events can lead to unexpected consequences which can give hope for the future. The Belfast Good Friday Agreement serves as a global model for conflict resolution and reconciliation. It has been studied and admired by nations facing their own internal conflicts, offering hope that even the most entrenched disputes can be peacefully resolved through dialogue and compromise. It stands as a testament to the power of diplomacy, compromise, and the human spirit's capacity for positive change. It has transformed Northern Ireland from a place of conflict and division into a beacon of hope and reconciliation. Peace is a journey, not a destination. While challenges remain, the progress made thus far is a testament to the enduring commitment of the people of Northern Ireland and the international community to building a better future, and I wish them every success. Thank you.